We constantly are hearing about repatriation these days. It's one of those topics that everybody's bringing up. A lot of the vendors are bringing it up because, of course, it suits their needs as vendors of products that could be used to build your own cloud. And of course, it's one of those things that a lot of companies are looking at as well. We've heard today that 84% of companies are considering repatriating their cloud workloads. But why? Why? If cloud was such a good idea, why would you want to repatriate? Well, cost is one of the things, certainly. Management, control of data, that sort of thing is another big one. Nathan, let's kick things off with this Cloud Field Day Roundtable. Talk to us a little bit about your opinion on cloud repatriation.
Yeah, so when I first heard these numbers, I kind of thought, okay, 99% of statistics are made up on the spot, but there's some reality behind this, I think, and it could be caused by multiple different factors, but I think the idea that 83% or 84% of customers are looking at moving their workloads is not surprising when you think that 100% of people in the cloud are trying to figure out how to reduce cost. And if they're trying to figure out how to reduce cost, they're probably things that are on-prem or solutions outside of the cloud are definitely things that they're going to dig into. And the other thing that I think about when I see this is what caused this? What is the reason why, now repatriation is getting a much louder and louder topic as we go from conference to conference, because I think Michael Dell has brought this up, Hock Tan brought it up, and we're hearing about it more and more about there's this shift of focus from cloud to on-prem. Personally, I think this is just a response to COVID when everybody wasn't able to get to the data center and they had to basically lift and shift all of their information and data and compute into the cloud. And they realized, okay, we're now returning to office. What are we going to do now with it?
So instead of lift and shift, they're going to drop and flop their data back to the data center.
100%. They dropped and flopped because it was a drop and flop.
So what do y'all think?
So one of the other stats that came out of today's session, I'm not sure if this is tied to the roundtable, but the amount of data that is sent to S3 on a weekly basis is almost equivalent to what most storage vendors would have done in their lifetime. So there's lots and lots of data still moving to the cloud. And I'm of the opinion, being an old storage geek kind of guy, is that where the data lies is where the applications will ultimately reside.
I think that's true, but it's probably in large part to the fact that a lot of new applications are being created in the cloud, and the other ones that they tried to lift and shift, but are probably just going to die on the vine eventually, except for those ones that just never go away for whatever reason. They remain on-prem or somewhat in flux where people can't decide should they be on-prem or not, whereas you've got a new breed of applications that are always going to run in cloud, most likely.
Yes, and in the wild game of analyst telephone and people saying that they heard someone that said something about this thing that my brother's sister, who was sick but called in that day to let us know that that's the statistic, it all tracks, I believe, back to Barclays. And then Barclays was then picked up and incorporated into a VMware presentation somewhere in New York City, which was then dutifully picked up, whatever that was, by Michael Dell or someone like that. And then it has legs and walks around. The reason I bring this up is it's actually 83%, not 84%. So because we've been talking about it, now it's become 84% because we were talking about a thing that was a thing. And it used to be closer to like under maybe 40%, I think. Or maybe it was actually over 40% because people were talking about that. Wow, 40% is going to be repatriated? But when you talk about where the applications are now, there's still a lot of them that are still exactly where they are. So for all the talk of getting repatriation, is that another way of just saying like, maybe I'm not moving to cloud at all. Maybe I'm just going to leave it right here. Or I'm going to leave just enough of it here because I can maybe make a rationalized decision as to what is the true application versus what are the applications. What is the proverbial lunch menu versus the mission critical thing that makes us money in terms of an application? So I think going back to original sources is important. And from my perspective, it will definitely be, to steal another phrase, it'll be different horses for different courses. So I think the more that we rationalize the larger application portfolio, like a financial services app that's the same exact .NET app, plus or minus header footer, is it really different apps? Is it? And is it cost effective to run that someplace other than sweated assets in a data center somewhere? I think these are all the questions we should be asking, not necessarily worrying about the percentages.
And of course,
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Jay. It's like I think the biggest change that's happened is that money isn't free anymore, and that's leading
post-ZERP.
people to. Yeah, exactly. So, well, now stuff costs more money, so people, as you say, they're trying to rationalize costs a bit, and that's driving some of the behavior. I'm with you on. I think the stats made up, and I don't think it matters. It tends to come from the vendors who have a vested interest in getting people to buy stuff on site. So of course they're going to talk that up. Like for the apps themselves, this has always been true. Some things work well in cloud when it's like it's an ephemeral workload. It needs to scale up. It needs to scale down. If it's something that just sits static and runs the same all the time, it's generally cheaper to just run that on some kit you've already bought. Now, maybe that's a reserved instance that just stays there and you pay whatever that is in a cloud. Maybe it's colo hosting. Maybe it's gear that you've actually got and you've already depreciated and you can run it there. Great. I think all of those things are happening. What's changing is that companies are just sort of looking at it going, well, what am I spending where? Can I move a few things around? Maybe I'll do test dev in the cloud, and then when it's actually working, I'll run it for real in the data center. Other stuff's like, you know what? We want to turn off all of this old gear and we'll just turn on some new cloud stuff because it turns out we don't actually like managing and running stuff. It's not actually about the infrastructure cost. It's about the operational hassle. All of those things are true. And I don't think we have a good handle on repatriation as a thing of like how much of it is really happening and what counts as repatriation. I don't think we've actually gone through that detailed exercise. And I don't know that there's much point. Like I'm not really that interested in discovering that answer because so what? What if we knew that? What can we do with that information that we're not doing already?
I think the one thing that does occur to me that would be important to know with regard to repatriation is that it has to run on something. If it's not running in a cloud service provider, it has to run on something. What is that something? And I think what is that something is really the essence of what all of the presentations at Cloud Field Day are and have been for 21 events now. I mean, it's all about what is that something that you're going to run these applications on. And so I think it does matter where it's running, at least to us. But of course, ultimately, it probably doesn't matter where it's running because it's going to run somewhere, that's for sure. So,
well, if you look at the concept of where it's running, we talk private cloud director, right, is the ability to have, and we've in other cloud days, field days, we've talked about various different implementations of building your own private cloud. So the cloud repatriation is not a technology question, it's a dollars, the finance question. It's what's really driving the discussion is when organizations moved to the cloud, there were two finance things that hit simultaneously. One was a switch from CapEx to OPEX in the budget, and that changed how people viewed it. And the second thing that hit was and from a technology perspective, it enabled you to instantaneously or very quickly spin up new workloads and new facilities, but at unknown costs that weren't budgeted for. When it was a CapEx, they were budgeted for. You said, I'm going to go do this. I need some equipment. I need some people. I need development time. You could figure it all out. So now you're seeing a lot of these things hit your budget in operating expenses that are very big surprises to organizations where they thought their bill was going to be this amount of money, and then the bill is 2x, 5x, 10x what they expected. And everybody says there's a visceral reaction says, well, that must mean the cloud is too expensive. Let's bring it back on-prem. Let's repatriate it. That doesn't account for the fact they don't look at it and say, well, we just got rid of a whole bunch of CapEx. We don't have servers. We don't have a huge IT staff anymore because we don't have to manage our own fleet of gear. And to bring it back on-prem means we have to bring all the gear in, do all the capital expense, as well as get all the people that we no longer have that were running all of that stuff. So I think this is being driven much more financially, and it's a pendulum swing that's swung too far one way and may go back the other way a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be an overall long-term effect.
You got me thinking about something. I just checked to make sure it's still up there. So we're almost on the 4.5 year anniversary of the AWS 7 Rs of migration. One of those R's is not repatriation because the blog post is from AWS, right? All the other R's are there, the replatforms and all that, but not repatriation. And if you said that you were going to do the replatform, and you said the way we're going to do that, or we're going to avoid the lift and shift, we're actually going to do it the right way this time. We're going to go cloud native. And someone would tell you a story about a strangler fig and how like you wrap enough fig vine things around a tree, eventually it looks like the tree. But what if you're still paying for the arborist? Who's trimming this thing? Okay, great, the tree is gone, but now I've got strangler figs that have approximated that same effect of that application that I've just torn apart and microserviced out. But that finance part's interesting because we've also seen a market increase in the word FinOps, and everything cloud cost, accounting, and so everything that the CFO, CIO, CTO, all those people that were sweating what was the thing in the data center, well, that same it's
Sweating it in the cloud.
and now you're sweating in the cloud, right?
Maybe sweating it more.
Well, and it's OPEX dollars.
Well, and that's the thing is it's OPEX dollars, which both hits your budget differently, hits your financial reporting if you're a public company differently, and it's not so much the absolute value of the dollars, it's the unplanned for expenses. It's the unpredictability that's the real scary part. And there's a feeling that if I have it in-house on-prem, I repatriate it, I have much greater control over the dollars than I would if it's external.
So
I think there is another part of it. The first move to the cloud back in the days, it was because, in my opinion, we had such a chaos in the infrastructure on-prem that moving to cloud was one of the only options to...
You mean the sacred cows that you can't kill, yeah.
Like clean the house,
Yes,
right?
right.
And right now, you need to find argument to move back because you already know, you're aware what is happening in your infrastructure. And the very good argument is in dollars, right? Everybody understands that. So I'm not surprised that that the company is using that argument because they already understood better their infrastructure, the application that they're running. And right now they can get the argument of dollars and move something back because it's going to be cheaper in the end.
Well, I think we've brought up money multiple different times, and I think money is the aspect that's driving the conversation such as this. So the first thing I would say is that it should be not lost on any of us that this was brought up and driven by a hardware company and a virtualization company that openly stated before they shared these numbers, we were too enthralled with the cloud, and now private cloud is the way forward. So it makes sense that they would be the ones pushing this narrative. Number two, and so there's definitely FUD being thrown away around fear, uncertainty, and doubt to the people that, we were going to move to the cloud, but now we're seeing this. We're not sure if this is going to be the right direction for us. The other thing that I think should be brought up is that the statement is about workload. It is not about the entire organization. And that's something that the conversation tends to always shift to. You got to get out of the cloud because it's too expensive. Well, what workload are you running? What does it look like? What are you trying to do? Well, it's a legacy VM that we just shoved into the cloud. Yeah, you should probably bring that back. Now, if it's a disaggregated application that has SQS, SNS, has a platform database, runs on Elastic Beanstalk and is serverless and multifaceted in how it's being ran, there's a good chance that should probably stay there. Not 100% chance, but a good chance. I think the idea of repatriation from a engineering perspective needs to be a continual question of, is this workload where it should be? Not necessarily a C-suite saying, we got to go to the cloud, and now, we got to get out of the cloud, and that's just bad engineering both directions.
Yeah, because technology is secondary. First.
That's the bit that actually did get repatriated, I think, is the operating model of the cloud. Like all the stuff that you brought up there about changing the platform and how you actually run workloads. All those techniques of like using Terraform to we'll use an API to spin up infrastructure or tear it down or change its configuration. It'll be heavily automated. It'll be elastic. We want it to scale with, we want to have an OPEX or we want to pay for it as we use it. All of those kinds of techniques, they all came back from cloud. They stayed in the cloud, But we're now adopting all of that stuff for the way that we run infrastructure, no matter where it is. So if we're actually talking like the bit that did succeed, if you want to call it repatriation, it's like everything is cloud now.
Yeah, and that's an important point. Is it just an exercise of futility to talk about repatriation when the largest provider of data center infrastructure platform is the only thing they sell is called cloud? It does it matter?
But as well, we have those technologies. Like 6 years ago, when we moved to the cloud, most of the workloads, there were no elastic technologies in the data center. It was old school, ClickOps, bash scripting, all those things that right now, when we think about it, it's like, I don't want to come back to. And people used to the cloud operational model, and now the same model, it's kind of accessible in-house.
Yeah, I heard a great analogy that was brought up, and Justin, you're right on point in terms of what actually has moved from the cloud back. I think that's good for us all to be aware of. If you are a taxi company, you don't want to hire Uber and hire a bunch of Ubers. You want to be a taxi company, buy a bunch of cars, and you want to be able to fix the cars, maintain the cars, manage the cars, and run the cars, if you are a taxi company. However, if you're not a taxi company and you're over here doing something else that has nothing to do with cars, you probably want to figure out how to take an Uber to get from point A to point B. That's a good analogy of where the workload or where the use case fits the model. Back to what Justin brought up in terms of the software and what can be done on the cloud. You can run Kubernetes on the cloud. You can run a disaggregate application in the cloud. But what you can't do, and where it gets way more expensive, is when you start looking at, you got to run 3 data centers that are highly available, and the Kubernetes workload has to be scaled across all 3 availability zones within your data center, and your data centers have to be spread across a certain distance to make sure that if a natural resource or a disaster were to happen. And I'm getting into like the minutia of the cloud, but that's where that needs to be done. And then the question is, well, that's only for the most capable, most high uptime applications that you run. And I would say to the person that says that to me, absolutely. Now you're thinking about the workload. You're not thinking about the cloud.
So if there was, if we said that cloud is an operating model, not a location, we take the location out.
Hey, that's catchy. I think that could catch on.
I think someone said that a few times before. And if we then said, security, is security something that's only cloud or something that's only in data center? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? Do they need to be different things? The third thing that we were the resilience, which you just kind of brought up, of like, is me being able to say that maybe I own a data center, maybe I have 2 colos for backup, whatever purpose. Maybe I don't own anything. Maybe it's all colo, or maybe it's something somewhere in between because I purchased from like a Dell or an HP, and I can use like an APEX, which is like OPEX, but for Dell stuff. Or if it's GreenLake, I think that's the OPEX equivalent for the HP part. Are those permissible? And if I'm doing things in those systems, in those environments, are those not cloud the way I'm using it? If I'm doing ClickOps, if I'm using bash scripts, whatever it is, am I still doing it the old-fashioned way? Is it that I'm actually not operating? I'm not doing cloud operating. I'm actually doing something old. So if the repatriation necessarily coming always back to a data center? That was the other question I would have.
I think that's a solid question, because when you're talking about HP, GreenLake, and you're talking about Dell, really Apex, those are really a financial model, not necessarily an operations model. Which goes back to what Jack was saying, right? And I think that same question fits to the financial model, back to what you were saying, of what is the financial model that you want? Is it OPEX? Is it CAPEX? And customers need to ask these questions, because right now, it feels like the world's your oyster, determination of how you want to pay for it, unless you're trying to buy VMware licenses. But the realization is that you have all these options and all these solutions in order to build what you need to build in a way that you need it to be built, right? And the unfortunate side effect that I keep running into is that the line of business managers, the people that need to make the decisions based off of the application, the uptime of the application, and the capabilities of the workloads, are the people that are not making the decisions. It's the people from the C-suites and the people from the engineering side. And those two are battling between each other, and the line of business guys are just like, hey, normally a line of business can also be like a developer or something like along those lines, but they're just kind of sitting there like, well, I can do it either way. I just need it to be up this amount of time.
Is there any kind of SaaS that you would ever repatriate to an IaaS that you would ever repatriate to a data center? Like, are you going to go out and recreate a CRM, that's as fully featured as like a HubSpot or a Salesforce or whatever? You're going to run Sugar CRM, not to pick on Sugar CRM, but like, let's say the Sugar CRM is good enough. Would you run that in IaaS or would you run that in your data center? Is there a reason why one's advantaged over the other?
Well, yeah, compliance. Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, there are certain customers that have to maintain a certain amount of compliance, and they use a certain model to maintain that compliance, and they're going to maintain the culture of compliance that they're used to, and that's what they're going to do. So if they say, well, I can't go into Salesforce, why not? Well, that doesn't fit what we do in order to maintain our compliance, their culture of compliance, then they're going to find some other solution that works for them.
Well, and also, I would say cost too. The thing is, a lot of SaaS is very expensive.
Yep.
And so, if we're going to shift our gears here and for repatriation to, I guess, patriation, basically, on-siting applications that have never been run on-site before, I think that cost is one of the big reasons, because a lot of SaaS providers have gotten pretty sassy about their bills. And so if you look at some of, CRM is a great example of an application, a SaaS application that was born in the cloud that frankly is extremely expensive, incredibly expensive. Some of these others, to be honest, our little company has never run so much on-prem as we do in 2024, which is kind of insane. We've got Sendy for mail lists. We've got Active Pieces for process automation. We've got all sorts of stuff. All of our websites are running on site now as well. And why would we do this? Cost. It just got really expensive really quickly. And I think a lot of companies are looking at it that way too. What do you think?
Do you use Office 365?
I don't.
Well,
we're paying for it though, so
and you're bringing up something that is, it didn't happen all at once. Probably It was probably built, like the old Johnny Cash song, a peak at a time, right? So if there was a strategy that you started with that said, like, our North Star is that we will have complete and total control over our destiny, and we have to be the most vertically integrated in our business. Those are probably people that have continued to just anchor themselves in their data center, whatever that might mean, colo, whatever, but they're committed to it. Maybe it's that they only run open source products, and maybe they have flirted with outsourcing certain things to other players, maybe even a VAR/MSP. But there is a cost. And so in your example, because you're running so much, do you ever feel like you're not getting you don't gain the benefit of a vibrant roadmap of a commercial SaaS vendor? Do you ever feel like, oh, if I could only have that feature? You got to wait for the community, upstream, to make it permissionable for you to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to be all about me, but I will say that a lot of the community projects actually have a really nice robust roadmap. I would say that ultimately as well, it's an indictment of the service level that you get from SaaS, in that in many cases with SaaS, you actually don't get any kind of service at all apart from the application is up and running. And I think there's definitely a blowback against that as well, where, there's nobody to talk to. There really is no support. There really is no hand-holding.
Well, today,
the two companies that we saw today, both were really emphasizing their support capabilities and how important that is, right? And I remember I was working for a company that was very early on in a GCP customer when it first came out, Google Cloud, and we had Google Email. We were a venture-backed company that was backed by Google Ventures, and email went down, and there was no place to call Google. And we actually had to call our Google VC guy to say, walk down the hall and find somebody to tell them that our email is down, right? If you're selling to businesses, businesses don't want to be interrupted, and that's a very important part of the equation. But the other thing I think you brought up, Stephen, is essentially return on investment question, right? Is how much am I paying for this, and is it worth it? And Jay, part of that equation is how much of the CI/CD pipeline from a consumer or customer perspective is important to me. How much do I need the new features or bug fixes that are coming around, right? If it's an accounting package, I don't need an update every month or every week on my accounting system. 99% of what I do is process invoices, get them, pay them, or generate them and get them paid, right?
Yeah.
And that's why should I pay the outrageous amounts I'm paying on a per user basis? It's an ROI question.
So during the pandemic, we sent everybody home to work that was a knowledge worker that we could, right? And so the question then is, did we encourage patterns of consumption of things where, like in your example, if it's down, you're working as hard as you can to bring it up, and if it was a SaaS application, to your point, you're waiting as hard as you can for something to be resolved. But if we come back or return to office, does that mean that we're also repatriating the network problems, the desktop support problems? And those connect to help desk systems. And do you run your own help desk system in-house, or do you outsource that to some help desk thing in another place?
Yeah. And so I think that what we've heard is that there's a lot to be said here beyond what we hear. What we hear is all about FinOps. What we hear is all about ownership. But there are many other things that are driving this repatriation question. And there are real financial concerns about repatriation. There are real ownership concerns. And now, another thing is that we've got technology, we've got products, we've got things that we can run in-house. I mean, it didn't used to be that you could run your own S3, but now you can easily. It didn't used to be that you could run cloud native applications on-prem, but now it's really not a problem. As we heard today, you can basically do anything you need. So I guess that's really maybe why 83 or 4, I'm just going to say 85%.
It's up to 85 now.
I think it's up to 85 at this point. Percent of companies are looking at cloud repatriation because they can, because there are compelling financial reasons too, and because basically they're not getting what they thought they were going to get from SaaS.